My brothers and sisters, every heart carries something it does not speak about. A quiet worry, a lingering fear, a question that keeps returning when the world goes silent. You smile, you function, you pray, yet inside there is a restlessness you cannot explain. Allah knows that feeling. He knows the weight you carry when you say Alhamdulillah, but your heart is still unsettled. He knows the nights when you place your head on the pillow, yet your mind continues to struggle. And Allah, in His mercy, never leaves the heart without guidance. Sometimes He allows discomfort not to punish us, but to gently remind us where peace truly comes from. Tonight, let us talk about that reminder. Let us talk about what it really means to let go and place our trust where it belongs. Anxiety is not a sign that Allah is angry with you. This is the first misunderstanding that must be corrected. Many believers quietly assume that if their heart is restless, if fear keeps returning, if peace feels distant, then they must be doing something wrong in the sight of Allah. They begin to blame themselves, their iman, even their du'as. But this assumption is not only incorrect, it is harmful. Anxiety is not a punishment, it is a signal. Just as physical pain alerts the body that something needs attention, anxiety alerts the heart that something is out of alignment. It is not there to shame you, it is there to guide you. Allah, in His mercy, allows the heart to feel unsettled when it is carrying a weight it was never designed to hold. Think of anxiety as a warning light on the dashboard of your heart. When that light appears, you do not smash the dashboard. You do not curse the light. You pause, you reflect, and you ask what needs adjustment. The problem is not the signal. The problem is ignoring what it is trying to tell you. When anxiety appears, it often reveals a silent struggle taking place within you. A struggle between what you are trying to control and what Allah has already decreed. A struggle between your desire for certainty and Allah's design of trust. You are trying to force clarity into matters that were never meant to be fully clear to you. Human beings crave certainty. We want guarantees. We want to know how things will end before we begin. We want assurance that effort will always lead to success, that patience will always lead to relief on our timeline, that loss will never touch us if we are good enough. But Allah did not create life to function this way. Allah created this world as a place of trust, not control. He created you to walk forward with reliance, not to stand still waiting for certainty. When you demand guarantees in a world built on tawakul, the heart begins to resist. That resistance is felt as anxiety. Allah did not create you to predict every outcome. He did not give you the ability to see tomorrow in detail, nor did He ask you to carry the burden of what might happen next. He created you to take the next right step while trusting Him with what lies ahead. When you try to do more than that, when you try to take Allah's role upon yourself, the soul begins to fracture under the pressure. This is why anxiety often increases when you overthink the future. The future belongs to Allah alone. The moment you try to live there mentally, you enter a space you were never meant to occupy. Your heart knows this even if your mind does not, and so it reacts. The soul rebels not out of weakness but out of wisdom. It knows that certainty belongs only to Allah. It knows that control is an illusion. And when you insist on holding what you were never given, the soul protests through restlessness, tension, and fear. This is why the question, why am I anxious, is often the wrong question. It keeps you focused on the symptom instead of the source. A more honest question is, what am I trying to control that Allah never asked me to control? Are you holding on to outcomes so tightly that your peace depends on them? Are you trying to manage how others think, feel, or respond? Are you demanding that life unfold according to your schedule, your expectations, your understanding? These silent demands exhaust the heart. Anxiety thrives where surrender is incomplete. Not because Allah is distant, but because the heart has not fully returned what belongs to Him. You are carrying worries that Allah already promised to carry for you. You are replaying scenarios that Allah has already written. You are fighting battles that Allah never told you to fight alone. This does not mean that feeling anxious makes you weak in faith. Even the best of hearts feel heavy at times. But it does mean that anxiety is an invitation to loosen your grip, an invitation to remember your place and Allah's position. Allah does not ask you to stop caring. He asks you to stop carrying what is not yours. There is a difference. Caring is human. Carrying the weight of the unseen is not. When you understand anxiety as a signal rather than a punishment, your relationship with it changes. You stop fighting yourself. You stop accusing your heart. Instead, you listen, you slow down, you return to Allah with honesty and humility. You begin to say, Ya Allah, I am holding on too tightly. I am afraid because I am trying to see what you have chosen to keep hidden. Help me trust you where I cannot see. And this is where healing begins. Not when the situation changes, but when the heart realigns. Not when certainty appears, but when trust deepens. Not when the future becomes clear, but when Allah becomes enough. That is why anxiety is not your enemy, it is a messenger. And when you understand its message, it no longer needs to shout. One of the greatest misunderstandings about trusting Allah is the belief that tawakul means switching off effort. Some people quietly assume that if they truly rely on Allah, they should stop trying so hard, stop planning, stop taking steps, and simply wait for things to fall into place. When life does not improve, they become confused and disappointed, thinking they trusted Allah, yet nothing changed. This confusion does not come from Islam. It comes from mixing trust with passivity. True tawakkul has never meant abandoning action. In fact, real reliance on Allah begins after effort, not instead of it. Allah created a world of cause and effect. He commanded action, discipline and responsibility while asking the heart to remain detached from outcomes. When these two are separated, imbalance appears. Anxiety often grows when a person works but does not trust, or trusts but refuses to work. Both extremes exhaust the soul. Allah wants you to move, but He does not want you to obsess. He wants you to strive, but He does not want you to suffocate under pressure. Tawakkul is the balance between action and surrender. You take the means seriously, but you do not worship them. You plan responsibly, but you do not panic if the plan changes. The problem begins when effort turns into control. Many people say they are anxious because they care deeply, because they are responsible, because they want to do things right. But if we are honest, much of that anxiety comes from attaching our worth to the result. Success becomes proof that we are enough. Failure becomes a verdict on our value. When this happens, effort stops being sincere worship and turns into emotional survival. This is not how Allah intended you to live. When you tie your peace to outcomes, you give those outcomes power over your heart. When things go well, you feel relief. When they don't, you feel crushed. This emotional roller coaster has nothing to do with effort and everything to do with attachment. Tawakkul teaches you to work hard while staying inwardly free. You show up, you prepare, you do your part with excellence. Then you step back and say, Ya Allah, I have done what I can with what you gave me. The rest belongs to you. That sentence, when spoken sincerely, lifts a heavy burden from the heart. Anxiety often comes from doing everything while feeling like everything depends on you. That belief is false. No matter how skilled you are, no matter how prepared, no matter how careful, outcomes are never fully in your hands. When you pretend otherwise, your heart lives in constant tension. True trust removes that tension. It allows you to work without fear of collapse. It allows you to try again without shame. It allows you to accept delays without panic, because your effort is no longer a demand for a specific result. It becomes an act of obedience. This is why tawakkul brings peace even before the situation changes. You stop asking, what if this fails? And start asking, did I do my part sincerely? That shift is powerful. It moves your focus from the uncontrollable to the controllable. From fear to responsibility, from outcomes to intention. Allah judges you by your striving, not by how things turn out. When you forget this, anxiety creeps in quietly. You start replaying scenarios. You second guess decisions. You fear outcomes that have not even arrived. Your mind races because your heart is clinging to results it cannot guarantee. But when you understand tawakkul properly, something settles inside you. You still care, but you are no longer desperate. You still hope, but you are no longer terrified. You still plan, but you are no longer imprisoned by the plan. You accept that sometimes Allah closes doors you worked hard to open, not because your effort was wasted, but because your destination was different. And sometimes Allah delays what you want, not to deny you, but to reshape you. This understanding transforms anxiety into patience. It teaches you that effort is worship, not a bargaining tool. You are not working to force Allah's hand. You are working because He asked you to. The results are His choice, not a measure of your worth. And when you live this way, you stop burning yourself out emotionally. You stop living as if every setback is the end. You stop treating every challenge as proof of failure. Instead, you move forward with steadiness. That steadiness is a gift from Allah. So if anxiety keeps returning despite your effort, ask yourself honestly, am I trusting Allah after doing my part, or am I trying to control what happens next? Because the moment you confuse effort with control, peace disappears. Tawakul is not doing nothing. It is doing your best and then letting Allah decide the rest. And when that truth settles in the heart, anxiety begins to loosen its grip. One of the heaviest burdens a human being can place on their own heart is the belief that they are responsible for how everything turns out. This belief is subtle. It does not arrive loudly. It slowly settles into the mind and disguises itself as responsibility, maturity, and concern. But in reality, it is a misunderstanding of your role as a servant of Allah. Allah never asked you to control results. This is something many people struggle to accept, because from a young age we are taught to measure our worth by outcomes. If you succeed, you are praised. If you fail, you are questioned. Over time, this conditions the heart to believe that results define value. And when that belief takes root, anxiety becomes unavoidable. In Islam, Allah makes a clear distinction between effort and outcome. Your responsibility ends where effort ends. Beyond that point, everything belongs to Allah. Yet many people continue carrying the weight of outcomes long after their effort is complete. They replay conversations, they analyze decisions. They punish themselves for things that were never fully in their control. This is not responsibility, this is self-oppression. Allah judges you by your sincerity, not by success. He looks at intention, not perfection. He records effort, not applause. When you forget this, you begin to live as if every outcome is a verdict on your worth, and that belief quietly destroys peace. Think about how often anxiety comes from questions like, what if this doesn't work? Or what if I fail? Or what if I made the wrong choice? These questions assume that you were meant to guarantee success, when in reality you were only meant to act with honesty and trust. The moment you believe results are your responsibility, fear becomes constant. Because results are unpredictable. They involve other people, unseen factors, timing, and divine wisdom far beyond human understanding. Carrying that weight is like trying to hold the ocean in your hands. The heart was never designed for that. Allah did not place the burden of outcomes on you because He knows you cannot carry it. That is why He took it upon Himself. When you insist on holding it anyway, anxiety is the natural consequence. This is especially important for people who are sincere, driven, and conscientious. They often feel anxiety more deeply because they care deeply. They want to do right by others. They want to make the correct choices. They want to avoid mistakes. But without tawakkul, this sincerity turns into pressure. Islam does not teach pressure. It teaches balance. You are required to try. You are not required to guarantee. You are required to strive. You are not required to control. When you blur this line, you begin to exhaust yourself emotionally. Many people live in constant regret because they believe different choices would have guaranteed better outcomes. They torture themselves with imagined alternatives. But Allah's decree is not built on hypotheticals. What was meant for you could never miss you. And what missed you was never meant for you. This truth is not meant to make you passive. It is meant to make you peaceful. When you accept that results belong to Allah, you stop personalizing everything. A closed door no longer means you are unworthy. A delay no longer means you failed. A loss no longer means you were abandoned. It means Allah chose a different outcome for reasons you may not yet understand. And sometimes those reasons are mercy disguised as disappointment. Anxiety decreases when you stop treating life like a final exam where every result defines your future. Life is a journey of obedience, not a performance review. Allah does not ask, did it work? He asks, did you trust me while trying? This understanding changes how you experience effort. You still work hard, but you no longer panic if things shift. You still care, but you no longer collapse if plans fall apart. You still hope, but you no longer cling desperately because your heart is no longer tied to results. When you internalize this lesson, anxiety begins to soften, not because uncertainty disappears, but because responsibility becomes lighter. You stop carrying what was never yours. You return outcomes to Allah where they belong, and that act alone brings relief. So when anxiety visits you again, pause and remind yourself, I am responsible for my effort, my intention and my trust. The rest is not my burden. The rest belongs to Allah. And when the heart finally believes this, it breathes again. Most anxiety does not come from what is happening right now. If we are honest, in many moments, nothing dangerous is actually taking place. You are sitting safely, you are breathing, you are alive. Yet your heart feels tight, your chest feels heavy, and your mind feels restless. Why? Because anxiety is rarely about the present. It is about a future you are imagining, and more specifically, a future where Allah is missing. When fear takes over, the mind begins to project scenarios forward. It starts asking, what if this goes wrong? What if I lose this? What if I am left alone? What if I cannot handle what comes next? These questions are powerful because they quietly remove Allah from the picture. They imagine outcomes without mercy, hardship without support, and pain without purpose. That is why they feel so overwhelming. The human mind, when left unchecked, creates futures that are harsh, lonely, and unforgiving. It imagines loss without replacement, failure without growth, and suffering without wisdom. But this imagined future is not reality. It is a story the mind tells when trust weakens. Allah has never allowed a moment of your life to exist without Him. Not in the past, not now, and not in the future you are so afraid of. Every tomorrow you fear is already known to Allah. Every challenge you imagine has already passed through His knowledge, His wisdom, and His permission. Nothing reaches you before Allah reaches it with you. Fear grows when you mentally step into tomorrow alone. But you were never meant to go there by yourself. The future belongs to Allah in the same way the past does. Just as He carried you through what you already survived, He will carry you through what you have not yet faced. Yet anxiety convinces you that what is coming will be different, that this time you will not be strong enough, that this time help will not arrive, that this time things will break beyond repair. This is not intuition, it is imagination without trust. When you believe that future hardship will arrive without divine support, your heart naturally panics. It tightens because it feels abandoned before anything has even happened. But Allah does not abandon His servants in advance. He does not test you and then disappear. His help is not reactive. It is already written into the test itself. The mistake many people make is trying to emotionally prepare for every possible outcome. They rehearse pain in advance, thinking it will protect them. But all it does is exhaust the heart. You end up suffering twice. Once in your mind, and once if the hardship actually arrives. Allah never asked you to suffer in advance. He asked you to trust Him step by step, day by day, moment by moment. The present moment is where Allah's help is accessed, not in the imagined future. When you stay grounded in now, you remember that Allah is with you, sustaining you, guiding you, and protecting you. When you leave the present and run ahead mentally, you leave that awareness behind. This is why fear feels so real, because the mind feels real. But just because something feels real does not mean it is true. Allah's presence is not limited by time. He is already in your future, arranging, protecting, delaying, redirecting, and guiding. What frightens you is not the future itself, but the illusion that you will face it alone. Once you correct that illusion, fear begins to lose its grip. This does not mean you will never feel concern. Concern is human. It keeps you alert and responsible. But fear that paralyzes you, drains you, and steals your peace comes from forgetting who controls tomorrow. When you remember that Allah is already there, waiting, fear softens into trust, anxiety loosens into patience, and uncertainty becomes bearable. You begin to tell yourself, whatever comes next will come with Allah. And that single thought changes everything. So when fear visits your heart, do not argue with it aggressively. Gently remind it of the truth. Remind it that Allah has never failed you before. Remind it that the future you are afraid of is already under His care. You do not need to see how everything will work out. You only need to know who is in charge. And when that settles in the heart, the future no longer feels like a threat. It becomes another place where Allah will meet you just as He always has. Many people think letting go means giving up. They confuse surrender with defeat. They imagine that if they stop holding on so tightly, they will become careless, weak, or irresponsible. This misunderstanding keeps them trapped. They continue gripping what exhausts them, believing that constant tension is a sign of strength or faithfulness. But in Islam, letting go is not weakness. Letting go is worship. When you let go for the sake of Allah, you are not abandoning effort. You are abandoning arrogance. You are not stepping away from responsibility. You are stepping away from the illusion that you were ever in control. And that shift is deeply beloved to Allah. True worship is not limited to prayer, fasting, or charity. Worship also lives in the heart. It lives in the moments where you choose trust over panic, surrender over obsession, and reliance over fear. When you release control and place it in Allah's hands, you are making a powerful statement of faith without speaking a single word. You are saying, Ya Allah, I trust your knowledge over my anxiety. I trust your wisdom over my understanding. I trust your timing over my impatience. That sentence, even when spoken silently, is ibadah. Many hearts are tired not because they lack faith, but because they are fighting Allah's decree while claiming to believe in it. They say Allah is the most wise, yet they resist His choices. They say Allah is the best planner, yet they panic when plans change. This internal contradiction creates constant unrest. Letting go resolves that contradiction. It aligns what you believe with how you live. It allows the heart to finally rest in the truth it claims to accept. When belief and behavior move in the same direction, peace follows naturally. This does not mean you stop feeling sadness, disappointment, or concern. Letting go does not numb emotions. It orders them. It places them in their proper position. You still feel, but you are no longer ruled by what you feel. One of the reasons letting go is so difficult is because it requires humility. Control makes us feel important. Worry makes us feel involved. Obsession makes us feel necessary. When we let go, we are forced to admit that Allah was sufficient without our constant interference. And the ego resists that truth, but the soul longs for it. The soul knows that it was created to trust, not to manage the universe. It knows that peace does not come from controlling life, but from submitting to the one who controls it. That is why, when you finally let go sincerely, something inside you softens, the tension eases, the constant inner noise quiets. Allah replaces what you release. This replacement is not always visible on the outside. Sometimes the situation remains exactly the same. The problem is still there. The delay continues. The uncertainty remains. But the heart changes. And that change is everything. Allah sends sakina into a heart that surrenders, a calm that does not depend on circumstances, a steadiness that does not collapse under pressure. This calm is not something you force. It is something Allah places gently within you when He sees your trust. This is why letting go is an act of worship. It invites Allah's presence into the heart in a special way. When you cling, you rely on yourself. When you surrender, you rely on Allah. And Allah loves when His servant relies on Him. Many people wait for peace to let go, but Islam teaches the opposite. You let go to receive peace. You surrender first, then tranquility follows. If you wait until everything makes sense, until fear disappears, until outcomes are guaranteed, you will never let go. Letting go happens in uncertainty. That is what gives it value. It is easy to trust Allah when things are going well. The real act of worship is trusting Him when things are unclear, uncomfortable, or painful. That trust is seen by Allah. It is recorded and it is rewarded. Sometimes in ways you recognize, and sometimes in ways you will only understand later. So if your heart is tired, ask yourself honestly, what am I still gripping? What fear am I rehearsing? What outcome am I demanding? What control am I refusing to release? Because the moment you let go for the sake of Allah, you are not losing anything. You are returning what never belonged to you. And in that return, the heart finds relief. There is a quiet rule that governs the heart, whether we acknowledge it or not. Whatever you cling to gains power over you. Whatever you refuse to release begins to shape your emotions, your reactions, and your peace. This is not always obvious at first, because clinging often disguises itself as care, responsibility, or love. But over time, its effect becomes clear. When you cling to something, you give it authority over your inner state. If you cling to people's approval, their words begin to define your worth. A kind comment lifts you, a criticism crushes you, your peace rises and falls with opinions you cannot control. That is not freedom. That is emotional dependence. If you cling to outcomes, your heart becomes hostage to the future. You cannot relax until things turn out a certain way. You cannot enjoy the present because your mind is busy negotiating tomorrow. Every delay feels threatening. Every uncertainty feels unbearable. This is how anxiety quietly takes over. If you cling to timelines, impatience begins to dominate you. You feel late even when Allah's timing is perfect. You feel behind even when you are exactly where you need to be. The heart becomes restless not because something is wrong, but because it refuses to accept when Allah chooses to act. Islam teaches us something very different. It teaches us to cling to Allah alone. When you cling to Allah, everything else loosens its grip. People no longer control your emotions. Outcomes no longer define your worth. Delays no longer feel like rejection. You still care, but nothing owns you except the one who created you. This is why letting go is not loss, it is liberation. Many people are exhausted not because life is too hard, but because they are clinging to too much. They are holding on to fears, expectations, grudges, and imagined futures. Each one drains energy. Each one pulls the heart in a different direction. Over time, the heart becomes overwhelmed. Allah never designed the heart to be pulled in 100 directions. He designed it to be anchored. When your heart is anchored to Allah, storms may still come, but they do not carry you away. When your heart is anchored to anything else, even small waves feel destructive. Clinging also affects how you see yourself. When you cling to success, failure feels like humiliation. When you cling to stability, change feels like danger. But when you cling to comfort, growth feels like punishment. The heart resists what it fears losing, even when Allah is trying to move it forward. This resistance creates tension, and tension creates anxiety. The difficult truth is that many of the things we cling to were never meant to last. People change, situations shift, plans fall apart. When your peace depends on things that are temporary, peace itself becomes temporary. Allah is the only one who does not change, the only one who does not leave, the only one who remains constant when everything else moves. That is why clinging to Him brings stability even in unstable times. Letting go does not mean you stop loving, striving, or hoping. It means you stop demanding that these things guarantee your happiness. You release the expectation that they must go a certain way for you to be okay. And when you release that demand, something powerful happens. You regain control of your heart by giving control back to Allah. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of faith. When you try to control everything, you feel powerless. When you surrender control to Allah, you feel strong. Not because you suddenly know what will happen, but because you trust who is handling it. Ask yourself honestly, what am I clinging to right now? What thought keeps returning? What fear refuses to leave? What outcome feels necessary for my peace? Whatever your answer is, that is what currently controls you. And Allah is inviting you to loosen your grip. Not because He wants to take something from you, but because He wants to give you something better. He wants to give you a heart that is steady, grounded, and free. A heart that is not shaken by every change. A heart that rests even when life is uncertain. When you let go of what controls you, you make room for Allah to take control. And Allah's control is not harsh. It is gentle, wise, and full of mercy. So do not be afraid to release what you are clinging to. What is truly meant for you will not escape you. And what leaves was never meant to own your peace. There comes a moment in every believer's life when the heart grows tired of struggling. Not tired of effort, but tired of resistance. Tired of replaying the same worries. Tired of trying to force outcomes. Tired of carrying a burden that never seems to get lighter. That moment, though painful, is often the doorway to real peace. Peace does not begin when life becomes easy. It begins when you finally stop fighting what Allah has already written. Many people spend years asking Allah to remove discomfort while holding tightly onto the very control that causes it. They want peace, but they also want certainty. They want relief, but they also want guarantees. They want Allah's help, but only on their terms. This internal conflict keeps the heart restless. True surrender ends that conflict. Surrender does not mean you stop caring about your life. It means you stop arguing with Allah about how it should unfold. It means you accept that your understanding is limited while Allah's wisdom is complete. When the heart accepts this sincerely, it softens. And when it softens, peace begins to enter. At first, surrender feels uncomfortable. The mind resists it. It asks, if I stop worrying, who will make sure things work out? It whispers, if I let go, what if everything falls apart? But these questions come from the illusion that worry was ever protecting you. Worry has never fixed the future. It has only stolen the present. When you surrender, you realize something profound. Life does not collapse when you stop controlling it. In fact, it often becomes lighter. You still take responsibility. You still make decisions. You still face challenges, but you are no longer suffocating under the pressure of needing everything to turn out a certain way. This is where peace begins, not in the absence of problems, but in the presence of trust. Surrender teaches the heart to say, Ya Allah, I do not see the full picture, but I trust you do. That trust removes the sharp edge of anxiety. It turns fear into patience. It turns uncertainty into acceptance. It turns waiting into worship. Many people think peace will come after answers arrive. But Allah often sends peace before answers. He calms the heart first, then allows events to unfold. Because once the heart is at rest, it can handle whatever comes next. This is why two people can face the same difficulty, yet one is calm and the other is overwhelmed. The difference is not the test. The difference is surrender. A surrendered heart no longer measures life by comfort alone. It understands that growth, wisdom, and closeness to Allah often come through challenge. It stops asking, why is this happening to me? And begins asking, how does Allah want me to respond? That shift changes everything. When you surrender, you stop resisting delays. You stop fighting unanswered questions. You stop demanding immediate clarity. You allow Allah's timing to unfold without panic. And in that allowance, the heart finds space to breathe. Peace is not the removal of uncertainty, it is the acceptance of it with Allah. This kind of peace is quiet. It does not announce itself loudly. It settles gently into the heart. You may still feel moments of concern, but they no longer overwhelm you. You may still feel sadness, but it does not consume you. You may still feel fear, but it does not paralyze you. Because surrender does not erase emotions. It places them under trust. The heart that surrenders understands something deeply. Whatever comes next will come with Allah. Whatever stays will stay by His will. Whatever leaves was never meant to remain forever. And nothing can reach you unless Allah allows it to reach you. When the heart truly believes this, it relaxes. This is the peace Allah promises. Not a life without struggle, but a heart that does not break under struggle. Not a future without uncertainty, but a soul that walks into uncertainty with trust. And this peace does not come from understanding everything. It comes from trusting the one who understands everything. So, if your anxiety has been heavy, if your heart has been restless, if your mind has been loud, perhaps Allah is not asking you to try harder. Perhaps He is asking you to surrender deeper, not to give up effort, but to give up resistance. Because peace begins not when life obeys you, but when you finally rest in Allah's will. And when that happens, even the storms feel different. The waves may still rise, but the heart remains anchored, calm, steady, and held. That is the peace of surrender. My brothers and sisters, if there is one truth to carry with you after this reminder, let it be this. Your anxiety is not proof that Allah has abandoned you. It is proof that your heart is still trying to carry what was never meant to be carried alone. You were not created to manage outcomes, predict the future, or control the unseen. You were created to trust the one who already holds all of it. When you stop resisting Allah's decree, the heart begins to rest. When you stop arguing with His timing, the soul begins to soften. When you finally release what you have been gripping so tightly, Allah replaces that tension with a calm that cannot be explained by circumstances. This does not mean your life will suddenly become easy. Tests may remain, delays may continue, uncertainty may still exist, but you will no longer be facing these things with a heart full of fear. You will face them with trust, and that changes everything. So return the burden to Allah, place the worry where it belongs, take your next step with sincerity, then leave the outcome in His hands. Whatever is written for you will reach you. Whatever is not written will never harm you. Let your heart learn to say without fear and without resistance, Ya Allah, I trust you. Because the moment you do, anxiety loses its power and peace quietly takes its place.